explanation. Part of the reason that we're doing section by section is because this will be reflected later on when we're doing aphorism by aphorism. And there'll be a lot less slides and all the rest of it. So what I've done this time is made selections from each section, and then I've inserted a question. So it's not going to be me reading 3 or 4 pages of stuff. Going to read one, set it up, and hopefully some of the questions may be really dumb because I couldn't always come up with something to ask. But I think, Barbara, you were the one who asked about questions last time, and I thought, wow, what a great idea that is. So that's how I've got this set up. Now, the questions, you may have questions of your own. You may have selected passages of your own. I've only got 3 or 4 from each section. So we really want to get a grip on what in this book is an argument and an essay. So that's what he's doing here. So, well, we're just going to start the show, literally. All right. So this is the summary of the previous session. The continuous development of art is bound up with the Apollonian and Dionysian duality, a tremendous opposition in origin and aims between the Apollonian art of sculpture and the non-imagistic Dionysian art of music, ultimately generating an equally Dionysian and Apollonian art form, Attic tragedy. Let us think of them first as the separate artistic worlds of dream and intoxication. In dreams, the great shaper beheld the splendid bodies of superhuman beings, and the Hellenic poet, if questioned about the mysteries of poetic inspiration, would likewise have suggested dreams. The beautiful illusion of the dream worlds, in the creation of which every man is truly an artist, is the prerequisite of all plastic art. We might call Apollo himself the glorious divine image of the principium individuationis, the principle of individuation, through whose gestures and eyes all the joy and wisdom of illusion, together with its beauty, speak to us. Under the charm of the Dionysian, man expresses himself as a member of a higher community. He's forgotten how to walk and speak and is on the way toward flying into the air dancing. His very gestures express enchantment. Just as the animals now talk and the earth yields milk and honey, supernatural sounds emanate from him too. He feels himself a god. He himself now walks about enchanted in ecstasy, like the gods he saw walking in his dreams. That's basically section 1. And I found this, I thought this is an important thing just to inform everybody. I was curious about this, you may be as well, and this sort of sets the stage for the spirit of music. The word music comes from muses, the daughters of Zeus and patron goddesses of creative and intellectual endeavors. Music was almost universally present in ancient Greek society, from marriages, funerals, and religious ceremonies to theater, folk music, and the ballad-like reciting of epic poetry. This played an integral role in the lives of the ancient Greeks. There are some fragments of actual Greek musical notation, many literary references, depiction on ceramics and relevant archaeological remains, such that some things can be known or reasonably surmised about what the music sounded like, the general role of music in society, the economics of music, the importance of a professional cast of musicians, etc. Plato banned the flute from the Republic and added, musical training is a more potent instrument than any other because rhythm and harmony find their way into the inward places of the soul. Okay. From section 2. We have considered the Apollonian and its opposite, the Dionysian, as artistic forces which burst forth from nature itself without the mediation of the human artist. Energies in which nature's art impulses are satisfied in the most immediate and direct way. First, in the image world of dream, whose completeness is not dependent on the intellectual attitude or the artistic culture of any single being. and then as intoxicated reality, which likewise does not heed the single unit, but even seeks to destroy the individual and redeem him by a mystic feeling of oneness. With reference to these immediate art states of nature, every artist is an imitator, that is to say, either an Apollonian artist in dreams or a Dionysian artist in ecstasies, or finally, as for example in Greek tragedy, at once artist in both dreams and ecstasies. So we may perhaps picture him sinking down in his Dionysian intoxication and mystical self-abnegation, alone and apart from the singing revelers. And we imagine how, through Apollonian dream inspiration, his own state, that is oneness with the inmost ground of the world, is revealed to him in a symbolical dream image. So the question I'm posing for this section, you can say anything you want as well about this section and almost all of section 2. This is just what I selected. So what does Nietzsche stress? Why does Nietzsche stress the artistic forces which burst forth from nature itself without the mediation of the human artist?
James had hands up.
James.
Yeah, I think one of the things he mentions in section 1 is the relationship between the sexes. So the female is assigned to the Dionysian, and the male to the Apollonian. And I think this is a reasonable idea that it is partly a sexual separation. He goes into a lot more detail in section 5 and 6, I think, but not so much. More or less, the paradigm there is between music and lyric, or music and tragedy. It starts with music and lyric, and then the argument becomes music and tragedy. But here he does mention in section 1 the sexual split, and that I think that might be what he means by nature. In other words, it's not the idea of nature, because it's not the idea of nature separated from man. It's the idea of what is nature, what is human nature, what is natural in human aesthetics, and as opposed to what is purely introduced by the and he's probably right to just split things along the Apollonian and Dionysian lines. In other words, if you split it this way, we don't have to be that concerned with the principles of Plato, or the virtues, or whatever, or the logic, or any of the or the mathematics, any of the other sort of Greek originations, because we can sort of describe maybe the pulse of the society through this principle that Nietzsche is talking about. And it devolves down to later on, it devolves down to he says it devolves down to will versus the I guess nature. The will versus the aesthetics of a situation. So I think that's so I just wanted to mention that the male-female thing, I think, is really very significant.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on what James said? Because I'm going to disagree with him completely. You're muted, Barbara. Yeah.
Maybe it was better that way. I was going to say I didn't see the male female at all. In fact, I don't even remember those words being used. I think what's interesting that is the Dionysian, because we don't associate mass intoxication.
Happened, but that's
You certainly saw more than I did. Anyway, I think that what he was just using that as a quick example of opposites didn't assign men to be Apollonian and women to be Dionysian. He was just saying that there, especially in the Greek world, they were definitely treated differently. I don't think that, I think he was just using that as a quick reference to opposites in that sort of sense. It's not that the sexual nature may be suggested there, but I don't think it plays an important role at all.
Well,
If
he's
it
called, the footnotes call a lot of attention to the, I'm not sure, the Enneads or the women that were Dionysian worshippers and their frenetic nature and so forth.
Oh,
Um, and let me see. Yeah.
As he's characterizing these as art impulses, though not specifically male or female, because that's what leads on the artistic impulses of the Apollonian and the Dionysian eventually come together in Greek tragedy, and that's almost the only time they ever come together in equal proportion. So nobody wants to deal with my question about
Question, what part of your question did I miss?
well, let me go back and see if I can. I think that's the one. Yeah, it's still up. Okay, it's this question. And that should be why. Sorry about that. Why does Nietzsche stress artistic forces which burst forth from nature itself without the mediation of the human artist?
Yeah, he
What is-
assigns that. Well, I just feel like he assigns that to the Dionysian, that the forces of nature that burst forth in art. He assigns that clearly to the Dionysian side, but then he does sort of like massage his ideas quite a bit section by section. I think in section 4 or 5, he's actually talking about lyrics belonging to the Apollonian, while music belonging to the Dionysian. So he varies it, but he feels like language is assigned to the human, and the music, feeling, nature, it's on the side of the Dionysian.
Right, right. The reason I highlighted that chapter is what I think he's saying is that these art impulses spring. It's like the best example I can give is, and this will come up later and explain the power of Dionysian music, is that music is unmediated. And so what he's suggesting here is when you are dreaming, you are not in control necessarily of what those dreams will be. You're not mediating the urge to dream. You just dream. You're not consciously in charge, and maybe that's even the best word to use. And with the Dionysian, you're not in charge of that either. That feeling, the best example I could come up with, and I mentioned this last week, is that sense of oneness with everything. That's why I made that joke about the Buddhist monk, make me one with everything. And that's not mediated either. Music goes straight to your heart. It completely bypasses any conscious manipulation. If you feel hear sad music, you're going to be sad. If you hear happy music, you're going to be sad, happy. You hear marching music, you're going to want to move your feet. You don't even, you don't think about doing it. You just do it. So that's what I think he's getting at. Okay, anybody else want to comment or offer? Yeah, Michelle.
I was thinking it's along the lines with as a response to Schopenhauer, who says there's no reality. Nietzsche's describing this as, can you give me the question again? As a direct acquaintance, a direct something mediate, a direct experience of reality, where Schopenhauer says there's no actual reality.
Well, okay, I'm not sure that that might be a proper interpretation of Schopenhauer, but maybe it is. And Nietzsche was definitely under the influence of Schopenhauer, and that needs to be remembered along the way here. And will, the word will that he uses is the will to live, the will to keep going, the will to
The will, from reading Nietzsche, from what I can recollect, is not attached to the human. It's more of a separation.
Yeah.
It's-
Yeah.
And I think Nietzsche is trying to show that there isn't a separation between the human and reality.
And he also, and this I brought up last time too, I think the music is a pure expression of will, and that's part of that unmediated nature. That's the image that represents world as will and representation. So will is at the bottom of the representation. It creates the representation, but the will is the fundamental ground of all being. Barbara.
Yes, so I'm wondering if this all suggests a reality prior to human beingness. And this isn't a rhetorical question. I don't know. When you say not mediated by man, are these forces somehow in nature before humans? And I would like to know what you think about that.
Yeah, they are. I know that much about the will. Maybe I should have put up the will piece on Schopenhauer again, but I can't get that gracefully. The will is fundamental to the world, and the world itself is representation. The will creates the world.
And of course, this is interesting because it's in contradistinction to God, that concept of God. And so it's the kind of opposite of that. He's not
Yes.
posing some divine source of being in his philosophy.
Jason, somebody's trying to get in. Can you see that?
I see it, yes. Okay.
Okay. Garth.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of throw out there this question of how exactly is music unmediated? I mean, I kind of was following along what you were saying, Lindsay, about it coming as a like complete expression of the will, but he is kind of comparing it to like these creative forces in nature. But music doesn't happen without humans. It's always going to be mediated through a human soul. So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there.
Okay. There's music. You're right in one sense. It's created by a musician, but the musician might even say that he's not sure where it's coming from. So I don't know. It's like maybe some of you have had a similar experience where I wrote a lot of stuff 30 years ago, essays. I was going to college at the time. And when I read those essays now, I do not recognize my own writing. It's as if some force inside picked out those words. I'm not sure if I'm really explaining this well, but I didn't know where I was going. So it was mediated by me transforming the words. And how many times have poets said it, it just came to them. They didn't know how it got there, how the words formed. But these people with poetic imaginations are able to do that. So the physical representation is created by people, but Pythagoras referred to the music of the spheres. Music was much more to the Greeks than just sounds made by a musical instrument. That's why I read that part at the beginning. Poetry was considered music. The music is generated by the will, the basic fact of nature, or supposition of nature or something. James.
Yeah, I think we don't have to necessarily treat his view, Nietzsche's view of the world, as being identical to Schopenhauer's. As a matter of fact, I think in general that's probably one of the biggest weaknesses that I'm finding in the work is that I don't necessarily find that those references to Schopenhauer are necessarily or to the will as being that pertinent to the meaning of the general meaning of the text. That not that he wasn't extremely influenced by his reading of the world as will and representation, which he mentions in the text. But so it's kind of like the same idea as like how he's influenced by Richard Wagner. So I think I think the thing I mentioned before is actually the first sentence in the first of the birth of tragedy in section 1. It just says that he just says it's a simile. The further development of art is bound up with the duality of the Apollonian and the Dionysian, just as reproduction similarly depends on the duality of the sexes. Their continuing strife and only periodically occurring reconciliation. So he's just making a simile.
Yeah.
That he's not saying it is sexual. Yeah, although it's true that the powerful one of the powerful images of Dionysian worship or Doric teaching and so forth is the maniads, the frenetic female dancers.
Yeah. I don't want to spend too much more time on Schopenhauer and the will, but this is the book. This is his first book, and it's also his intellectual break away from Schopenhauer. That occurs later in section 5, I think, where Kaufmann has noted that this is where Nietzsche departs from Schopenhauer. But when he uses the word will, he is using it as Schopenhauer used it.
I agree. Yeah.
Ken.
I'm not saying he's in accord with Schopenhauer.
Michelle, Ken had his hand up, so put your hand up, please. Ken had his hand up, so it's Ken speaking.
Oh, I was going to talk to something else, so it might not be relevant to this current topic, but I'll go anyway. So I was just thinking how like this might be related to how when people get drunk, they sort of tend to be less inhibited, so they tend to sometimes say things that they wouldn't normally say, and they might even say things they regret and do things they regret, and how like some artists, they tend to like use alcohol and maybe even drugs to get to like a I don't know, like a higher state of things so they can produce their art. Like I feel like it's something like this, right? Like, would you agree, Lindsay?
I would, I would tend to agree, if I'm getting your drift correctly, that a lot of those mistakes are caused just by, they just sort of happen. They come out of the blue. Yeah, they are effectively unmediated. You imagine that you are mediating, but you're really not. In fact, even trying to think about how you actually talk. We're way off the topic now, but after Michelle, I'm going to move on to the second selection I have. I've tried, just think about it sometime while you're sitting around. I didn't know I was going to say all those words. They just poured out of me. I've got something going on up there that I don't consciously seem to know what it is. And I am just getting it out through all of these words that I'm giving to you. Michelle.
I don't particularly want to go back to it. I wasn't saying that Nietzsche and Schopenhauer think the same or arguing the same point at all. I think Nietzsche is responding to Schopenhauer, saying that we have no access to the will, to reality outside of our empirical world.
Well,
I think saying we do have that access, and that's through the combination of the Dionysiac and the Apollonian.
Right. Well, he's speaking really in an aesthetic sense here. Those are the art impulses of nature. There are other impulses as well. What he's trying to develop is a theory about how Greek tragedy came to be. And that's where all of this is headed. So he's being selective in a lot of ways. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. Thanks for all that. That was great. Okay, we need not conjecture regarding the immense gap which separates the Dionysian Greek from the Dionysian barbarian. From all quarters of the ancient world, we can point to the existence of Dionysian festivals. These festivals centered in extravagant sexual licentiousness whose waves overwhelmed all family life and its vulnerable traditions. The most savage natural instincts were unleashed. The Greeks were apparently perfectly insulated against the feverish excitements of these festivals, for the figure of Apollo held out the Gorgon's head to this grotesquely uncouth Dionysian power. When similar impulses finally burst forth from the deepest roots of the Hellenic nature, these two antagonists were reconciled. But if we observe how, under the pressure of this treaty of peace, the Dionysian power revealed itself, we shall now recognize in the Dionysian orgies of the Greeks, as compared with the Babylonian, whatever that is, with their reversion of man to the tiger and the ape, the significance of festivals of world redemption and days of transfiguration. It is with them, the Greeks, that nature for the first time attains her artistic jubilee. It is with them that the destruction of the principium individuationis for the first time becomes an artistic phenomenon. So the question for that is, why does Nietzsche need to make this distinction between the Dionysian festivals of the Greeks and the surrounding non-Greek barbarian world? Jace?
Yeah, kind of like I try to answer, but basically it's a question. I feel like Dionysian is necessary to separate the human and the beast. So that's why Dionysian is a must. That's my answer. I'm not sure you agree or not.
Well, I'm not sure either. Does anybody have anything they want to say about this at all? Barbara?
Well, here and elsewhere, he talks about a reconciliation and a balance between the Apollinian and the Dionysian, that without the Apollinian, it's just wild, crazy, bestial energy, that you need the Apollonian to have that balance. And the other barbarians, supposedly ecstasies, did not have that element of the Apollonian. My only question is that I believe in the quote you read, there was the destruction of the individual principle. And that part I don't understand, because the Apollonian I thought was an affirmation of the individual principle. So I'm kind of a little confused about that.
Okay, before I get to James, there was a tension between these two things. One doesn't dominate the other.
Right.
And so principle of individuality has to succumb in some way in an art form that like a festival that's for, you know, the world transfiguration, that whatever the other phrase was he mentioned. These were celebratory things of man himself. But the representation, what you see is an Apollinian vision. It is not a Dionysian, because Dionysus is music. James?
Yeah, well, yeah, I think this is an interesting quote because it shows, I think Nietzsche is going for a division between the barbarian Dionysians and the Greek Dionysians. So, in other words, the he realizes in Greek society much more of a delineation of aesthetics that's occurring, and you can't find this delineation of the aesthetic in what he calls the barbarian Dionysian cultures, where there's evidence that they had a Dionysian principle, that they had alcohol, for example. They also had the two-sided God, in Zoroastrianism, for example. So in these other cultures, they didn't quite have the track record and the history, the historical emergence of tragedy. And he says that there's a very sharp and music as well, perhaps. So there's this very sharp line that he wants to draw between these other Dionysian cultures and ancient Greece.
Thanks for that. I do have a comment, but I'm going to pick on Geneva.
Well, you said something that I thought that sort of rang a bell with me, and you mentioned the tension. And I'm wondering if it wasn't like the tension between the barbarians and the others that would create something entirely new, because that's kind of how creation comes about, is two things that clash and cause the tension, and then something new comes into being. So I'm wondering if it's not the tension that would have come between the barbarians and the others. I don't know, just a thought.
And no, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
What I think he's driving at, and this is a question I have, and maybe after the next section, which is the last section in the last selection from section 2, is that the Greeks had the pantheon of Olympian gods. They had a god of beauty. The god symbolized artistic creation, and actually in one of his passages says, technically Apollo gave birth to the Olympians because Apollo was the god of dreams, and in dreams is where the Olympians came from. And the Olympians are very, very human deities. They do a lot of very human things. And that was what the Greeks had, and that was what the Greeks believed in. And the barbarians, tribes, or other societies never had that whole array of human nature deified. They had a single god, or they had a few gods, but none of them were characterized quite the way the Greeks managed to do. So the question I'm going to ask later when we get to it, I'll just repeat it again, probably just to see what happens, is without the Olympians, Greek tragedy never would have happened, because the Greeks would have been just like everybody else, technically. Anybody want to argue with me on that one?
Oh, I would only say that there's a cultural effect or a cultural modification that occurs. So you have pure religion, you have the pure belief in the gods and the excitement that's caused by the stories and so forth. But you also have the actual cultural evolution that happens among the culture, that happens in the culture. The Greeks themselves, they evolve, and they evolve their thinking. I think even in the introduction, I think there was quite a lot of that. The thinking is evolving from the purely Apollonian to the paradigm of Apollonian Dionysian. So it's kind of so this occurs over time, but it's in the Olympians are in the background, and they're absolutely important. I agree with that.
Yeah, they're fundamental is what I think he's suggesting here. I just want to remind everybody to please raise your hand if you want to say something. Jason has his hand raised.
Yeah, because they talk about Greek tragedy. I kind of think about through in the ancient time, is Greek is the only culture produced tragedy?
Yes.
I don't see Chinese created. So
Yes, no, tragedy, Attic tragedy, Greek tragedy in the from the 4th to the 3rd century, or whenever the time frame was, is absolutely unique in world literature.
yeah, that's good to know. Thank you.
Okay, Ken.
My question is similar to what Jason asked. So I was wondering if you think these two categories, like Apollonian and Dionysian, they are exclusive to the Greeks, or is there something more universal to other cultures? Even though if they didn't have tragedy, I feel like, a lot of other cultures sort of had the plastic arts as well, and they all had music, and, alcohol was pretty common across cultures. So I'm wondering if there's something more particular to the Greeks, or if it's something more universal.
I don't think it's something more universal just because of the uniqueness of the Greek civilization. I gave a list last time of all the things that the Greeks created, invented, that no other societies did, and all of Western civilization is fundamentally founded on what happened during that period. Classical Greece, democracy, non-existent in the world. And even though it was a faulty, blah, 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 whatever, not quite 100% democracy, it was democracy. They invented comedy. They invented drama. They were the first scientists by any definition in the world. And why? And I think one point that Nietzsche is making that I think is absolutely for real is the pantheon of Olympian gods are, I don't know of another. The Norse had Thor and this and that, but they didn't have the array of gods committing the array of sins that, human sins that the Greeks had. It's extraordinary what was going on Olympus. And that was the inspiration, not the inspiration maybe, but this was a reflection of the Greeks themselves in the way that Thor wasn't a reflection of a Norseman, I think. I may be reaching too far there, but I'm not sure. Michelle.
I would agree with what you're saying there. I think the difference between the barbarian Dionysiac and the Greek is that the Greeks had their god, particularly Apollo, where the barbarians didn't, and Apollo gives them that form, that discipline to stop them being overrun by the Dionysiac. I think that's
Yeah, no, that'll be developed as we go along here. This early part, this is an argument, right? And he's throwing out a lot of broad theses, and then he's going to start to try to prove them and demonstrate how this tension was resolved in Greek tragedy.
Yeah, because in that part where you're questioning, it says, although news of these Dionysiac festivals reached them by every sea and land route, the Greek appear for the first time to have been completely protected and insulated from their feverish stirrings by the figure of Apollo.
Yeah, yes. He's saying by the aesthetic gift that Apollo provided as the god of beauty. That's why their architecture was so extraordinary, even in the ancient world. Because I don't know how to quite associate it. I haven't thought that deeply about how to connect it up, but something like that. Ernest.
Yes, Lindsay, you mentioned that Greek inventions and tragedy and comedy and stuff like that, but also preceded all that, there was invention what we call now sport. They created Olympic Games in 776 BC, even 200 years before they created drama or anything like that. That was also big achievement because it created competition. And that's what a Dionysian festival, it was competition between different poets, different tragic poets. And it was also very well discussed because there was nothing else. They didn't have TV or radio. So that performances was for 1 year on the lips of everybody, and everybody discuss. That was very popular. It's not like we have performances now at the Metropolitan Opera. It was very cultural event.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. We'll come back to that later on. And something that I haven't dealt with at all so far in this section, I don't think Nietzsche really deals with it much either. Later he will, is the agon, the contest. Even when Greek tragedy was at its height, they were contests between the tragedians to see who would write the best tragedies. So this is another fundamental ground of the Greek society. James, I'm going to finish with you and then move on so we can finish section 2.
Yeah, on Apollo, I think he was incorporated into the Roman pantheon. I'm not sure at what time or exactly how, but he became important in the Roman pantheon. And I wanted to mention that Seneca was a tragedian. He wrote tragedies, and I'm not sure if his tragedies were that far off from the Greek tragedies. They could have been modeled that way. And then on that last question, the Greek had. I recently was in Athens, and they had artist guilds. They had so many. The reason that ancient Greek has so much art is because the artists were professionally organized, and the archaeologists say that the god of the artists guilds was Apollo. So that there was a direct connection between Apollo and the art guilds, which were the professional guilds of the sculptors and painters, etc., in ancient Greece.
Yeah. Yeah, the Romans just sucked up Greek society totally. So, and that was just a process of cultural evolution. And once Alexander conquered the world, then that was the end of the Hellenic era, roughly speaking. Okay, so we're going to do this last section. The song and pantomime of such dually minded Apollo Dionysian revelers of the Greeks was something new and unheard of in the Homeric Greek world. And Dionysian music in particular excited awe and terror. In the Dionysian dithyramb, man is incited to the greatest exaltation of all his symbolic faculties. Something never before experienced struggles for utterance, the annihilation of the veil of Maya, which is the veil of appearance, oneness as the soul of the race and nature itself. The essence of nature is now to be expressed symbolically. We need a new world of symbols, and the entire symbolism of the body is called into play. Not the mere symbolism of the lips, face, and speech, but the whole pantomime of dancing, forcing every member into rhythmic movement. Now let's see what I've got for a question on this one. Why is the Dionysian dithyramb so important to Nietzsche's thesis? Well, this is one of the dumber questions. Because there isn't going to be any tragedy. There isn't any Dionysian dithyramb. So what are you going to do? James.
Can anyone connected with poetry express to me what a dithyramb is?
Yeah, I had a slide for that the last time around. The dithyrambs were the Greeks' celebrations of Dionysus. They were held in a theatrical situation, and that was what started the whole nature of theater, the way they were presented. Satyrs, which I have a picture of later on, but we're not really there yet, were half man, half presumptively goat, but they don't look very much like goats. They just have tails. Would dance and sing and make this music in honor of Dionysus in a theatrical setting before there were theatrical settings. And that sets the stage for what is to come. And without the dithyramb, the whole concept that the Greeks developed, there would not be tragedy. It wouldn't have come to pass. It was the nature of the dithyrambic festival that that produced the audience participation. There was so much going on in these things that would play an important role later.
I was just
Oh,
wondering
Jason.
if this reminds anyone else of electronic dance music nowadays.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. That would be interesting to figure out how to characterize that. Okay, Jason.
Yeah, I will say yes. Just like today we went to the sport game or went to the Tyler Suite. Okay, then people get crazy. So to answer your question, I think my answer is correct. Because you want to break out the principle of individuality. So you are not yourself. You break the boundary of me and the others. So everybody become a bigger one. So I think that's the purpose or the significance of so-called dithyramb festival.
Yeah, yeah. I'll tell you what. Does anybody else have any more comments on this in particular? Yeah, Barbara. You're muted.
Yes,
There you go.
now I'm unmuted. The dithyramb is a link to the chorus, which becomes important. So the chorus might come out with a song, "Oh Muse, be near me now," and etc. So I thought it was words are being added on in terms of the drama, and it's not just ecstatic dancing.
It's a combination of all of that. The dithyramb became the chorus, and that's part of the importance as well. Let me do something here. I'm gonna give me just a second to regroup. I want to open up what I had in the first place, and sorry, I'm having some issues here. Okay. I haven't got it anymore. I thought I saved it. This is terrible.
You want to share your screen?
Well, I do, but I want, now wait a minute, let me just double check here. Maybe I've got this. Yeah, music and classical grace. Nope. Somehow the very first thing where I had I intended to save it. Okay. No can do, unfortunately. Earhead, I think we'll let Earhead stay in the waiting room.
I'm not sure. Okay.
Can I ask a question, Lindsay?
What if I said no?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, then I won't.
No, of course you can. Put your hand.
Well, I wanted to, because Barbara was talking about the dithyramb being the chorus, and the chorus I understood to be like the
Eva, can you hear me? Put
oh,
your
no.
hand up. Get in the queue.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, sorry.
Keep the
I'll put it
question,
up.
James.
Okay.
Okay, I'll try to be brief. I just agree with Barbara. I just Wikipedia'd it, and it looks like most of the Western world thinks that dithyramb is a musical form, but maybe it's just the party, not the form. I don't know. In ancient Greece, maybe it was originally the party.
Yeah, if I can recover what I had, I'll stick it on the front end of the next session, just so that we can all be a little clearer about what it all is. Geneva.
Okay, wait. Okay, so Barbara was mentioning that the dithyramb was sort of the chorus, and I was understanding, and maybe this came later, but I was understanding that the chorus was sort of the part of the play that was giving the lessons to the people who were listening. Like, you know, don't kill your father, or that's pretty simple, but it
Always
was
good.
that sort of thing. Is
Yeah.
that, was that true, or did that come later, or because this seems to be like the very beginning
Yes,
of
this
dithyrambs, and so maybe this came later.
this is the beginning that we're going to
Yeah.
develop up leading up to section 7, and section 7 is almost the final point of the argument. So we've got sections to get there, and those questions will be answered along the way. So just keep in mind always that this is a this is an argument that he's making, and he's putting out these broader things at the very beginning, and then he's going to show their importance and their place in the.
Hey, Nick here, just joining in.
Yeah, you're kind of late, Nick. We're wrapping up.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I just had a minor question on yeah, notice he used the expression male, the veil of Maya in that passage that you quoted. I wonder if there's any significance in that, because to my memory, I think it's a Buddhist concept. I wonder
Yes.
why he didn't use like more Western concepts. I think there are like concepts from Egypt and all that stuff.
It's Schopenhauer at work.
Oh,
The
okay.
veil of Maya is all of the stuff that we put explaining our lives, and it's the illusion that we live in instead of the reality of the ground of nature, which is ugly and miserable and scary and horrible. We create this illusion around us that life is worth living. I mean, I am throwing that out because Schopenhauer couldn't figure that one out. Nietzsche figures it out, and that's part of what's going on here as well. Nietzsche will develop this theme of the value of life for the rest of his career, and that comes a little bit later down the road. But that's left over from Schopenhauer. Maya is an Eastern Indian, an Indian, not Eastern, but Indian concept, Buddhist concept, or even maybe Hindu or something. It goes further back than that. Schopenhauer was heavily influenced by the Upanishads, the Bhagavad Gita, and several of the actual philosophical texts of the East. And that's where that comes from. James.
Yeah, the way I describe that is like that there is no dark side. The veil of Maya is that people don't actually tell lies. Everything is just the way it's presented. You can pretty much trust everyone. No one will ever kill each other. No one ever kills another person for a good reason. It's always, for bad reasons. The dark side is excluded from our lives, and that's part of the veil of Maya, the religious belief that everything has to follow a heavenly order, if you will. And it doesn't just exist in the West. It's even in I don't know. You could comment, Jason. What is it part of Taoism? The veil of Maya?
No. I think it's Hindu. Yeah, I think it's Hindu, and you're basically right. You're basically right. It's the way we look at the world and hide the ugliness from our view, because we are thinking of ourselves as individuals caught in this mess. And when you're in the dithyrambic moment, if you are one of the revelers, you no longer think of that. You don't see it. You are intoxicated with the spirit of all of you in it together and this joyous celebration of the God, blah, 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 that sort of thing. Okie dokie. All right, so this is how this worked for me. Did it work for you? Yeah? Okay. This
So
is how we're.
Lindsay, you may want to announce what's next week's schedule so we can.
Oh, well, now it's going to be, I'm going to do 3 through 7, and this worked pretty well. I hope you guys are really patient, and thank you so much for your input. I really, really appreciate it. This was a really good discussion for me too. I think I know a lot, but like I've got it, I don't know if any of you saw the thing up here. This is one of my favorite Nietzsche quotes. It's a very popular error, having the courage of your convictions. Rather, courage is having the strength for an attack on one's convictions. So I never block anything, and I'm always open, because this is my own way of looking at this, and I think it's the right way, of course, but.
Yeah, let me say something, and yeah, thank you everyone. And last time I do receive a couple of response from the audience. So if you have any suggestion and you feel too slow, too fast, too deep, too shallow, and whatever, just let us know. You can let Lindsay or let me know. I think you can find out from the meetup page and send a message to us, because we are trying. It's a difficult text. And then from book to book will be different format, because when we read the Birth of Tragedy and read the Everett will be a totally different format. So we are trying to go through all this Nietzsche's life. I think that's Lindsay want to do. And then let us know how do you feel, and then we will have a happy 1 hour, I think.
Okay, one other thing.
Jason, this is the right pace. This is just right.
Yeah, I agree.
Don't listen to the complaints. You're doing fantastic job.
I agree with Ernest.
We're canceling all the complainers.
Excuse me. One thing that I'm going to try to do next week, I do this with a lot of my other meetups, is I'm going to have the next session already prepared, and I'll provide you the link so you can RSVP. Today, as it is, I failed at that job, and I apologize, but later today, the next session will be available, and just so look for your emails for the next couple of hours. Don't throw them all away. Okay. See you next time.
Okay, bye. Thank you.
Adios.